All right, we are live. Officially, Mark is on his phone. We are on YouTube now, and we're live on Rumble. I have no idea how many people are watching us on Rumble. I don't know. The Rumble app is kind of difficult to see who's actually watching or how many or what's going on sometimes. I'm not sure what the deal is on that. And on locals, we have 20 some odd people watching. And we are back talking about now. This character kind of touches, well, he obviously touches LBJ in a lot of ways, but he touches JFK a little bit too, right?
He touches a lot of stuff. I didn't even know what category it fits into. Maybe the rogues category, because I wanted to do Billy Saul Estes after this.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? So he's kind of like in the Billy Saul Estes department of rogues. Cronies, yeah, he's in the crony department, but he doesn't really work for LBJ, so he's not employed by LBJ. That's one of the weird things. Everybody else is kind of working for LBJ as his mob, but this guy, even though he's super close to LBJ, is not an employee.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, now, okay, of course, today we are talking about the illustrious Bobby Baker. Now, Bobby has come up before on other shows because he's so tight with the big guy.
The big guy. Mr. Big, the big guy, he refers to him, interestingly enough, years ago in his memoirs as the big guy. And he is the big guy. I just found it. There's so many similarities, Eric, between the current Brandon administration and this guy's administration. I mean, it's astounding how many criminal similarities there are, how much crap there is, how much the Democratic Party, the health. I mean, let me put it this way. He didn't have an age problem, LBJ, but he had a heart problem. He had a massive heart attack, which all of the newspapers in the late 50s said, well, that's the end of his presidential aspirations, because who's going to vote for a guy who has a bad ticker? And he got so depressed, he's taking antidepressants, he's in the hospital. Baker's downstairs in the lobby for, I think, like 4 or 5 consecutive days sleeping there, because only his family was allowed to visit LBJ in the room. So Baker just camped out in the hospital lobby, but we'll get to that part a little later on.
Wow. That was, I guess, towards the end then? Jeez.
No, it was, I think, 1952 or something. He has a heart attack, and then he has 2 heart attacks, not towards the end at all. This is the massive heart attacks that LBJ has that puts him on a rocket to stardom, determination to become president, because he realizes, among many other realizations, that nobody's going to vote for a guy who's had a heart attack. So he's got to find another way, Hunley, to become president. And he hates the job. He really doesn't want to be in the second term, because he can't imagine 5 more additional years of being the JFK vice president. So he doesn't know what to do. And then scandals start closing in. So we're going to get to that a little later. But I just want to back up on Bobby Baker, who comes out of Pickens, South Carolina, total country boy, comes out of some degree of poverty, although his father, I think, might have been the postmaster in some government-appointed job. So Baker, through some political connections in the late 40s, becomes a page in the Senate with little short pants, with a bunch of little boys. He's like 13, 14 years of age. He's little Bobby Baker, and he becomes one of the pages, you know.
Wow.
Yeah, he is what he refers to as a child of the Senate. Everything he does in life, he does in the Senate. He learns how to shave while in the Senate. He goes on his first date while in the Senate. He graduates high school while in the Senate. Every single thing. He grows up in the United States Senate and
Wow.
becomes the most powerful man in the Senate, referred to by many as the 101st senator.
Yeah, I saw that. That is crazy. I think this is the youngest photo we have of.
Well, no, that we have. Yeah, that's what
Yeah.
Skeeter Johnson, one of his sidekicks. I think Skeeter Johnson might have been a page at one time too. But yeah, he's going to graduate high school, goes to law school in D.C. So later on, he's actually in law school. But none of that really matters because he is Mr. Fix-It in the Senate, and he gets promoted up to become a telephone page, and then he becomes the head of the pages, and he goes from short pants to long pants. I mean, if there ever was a movie to be made, an obscure movie to be made that would be unbelievable, like Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, it's the Bobby Baker movie, because this story is so incredible. As an Americana, as a piece of Americana, Eric, it's astounding. And nobody really knows about Bobby Baker because he ends up, in a bad spot.
So yeah, I was going to say it had the sequel. It's like Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, then Mr. Smith Goes somewhere else.
Right, which we'll get to. It's kind of funny because Mr. Baker, or Bobby Baker, has two guys who are his rabbis. One is Bob Kerr out of Oklahoma, Senator Robert Kerr, who is a multimillionaire before he becomes a senator. Bob Kerr is the anti-LBJ. LBJ makes all his money through corrupt means in the House and Senate. He comes in with nothing, leaves a multimillionaire many times over as Senate Majority Leader. No explanation as to how he makes the money. Bob Kerr, on the other hand, is part of Kerr-McGee Oil. He is an oil millionaire. He invests money. He helps out Bobby Baker. He will later loan Bobby Baker tons of money. He will help people he wants to help. He uses his money as a weapon in the Senate. And he doesn't drink or smoke or chase women or anything. And he is the anti-LBJ. He's a righteous dude. He's a dick, according to Bobby Baker. He's like a prig. He's a straight, real dick, according to Baker. But he's Baker's rabbi, along with a guy who's not there yet, who will show up after he becomes landslide Lyndon, and that's LBJ. And Bobby Baker gets a call from a guy that day and says, "Hi, this is Lyndon Johnson. I understand you know where all the bodies are buried, don't you?" And that was the line he gave him. And that's a younger Bobby Baker there, maybe at 15 or something.
Yeah, it's 1945. I forgot. It was the earliest one I could find with Leslie Biffle. I'm not sure who that is.
Okay. I don't know who that is, but that's Baker there on the left. And Baker becomes privy to every single secret of every senator in the Senate. That's his superpower. And he provides this to Lyndon Johnson. And Lyndon Johnson uses Bobby Baker to go around and learn which way the wind's blowing on votes. He uses him to find out who's an alcoholic, who is a womanizer, who's got secrets. Bobby Baker is from 1948 till LBJ leaves the government, till LBJ leaves in 1968, so it's 20 years. He is the eyes and ears of LBJ in the U.S. Senate. And that, even when LBJ is the master of the Senate, when he's Senate Majority Leader, Bobby Baker is the secretary of the Senate. I mean, dig this title. He's the secretary of the Senate. And they have a vote rigged by LBJ, and he wins this vote. That's never happened before anyway. So LBJ puts this guy in power, or put it this way, he expands his power. Now you say to yourself, how does LBJ make a living? Well, LBJ makes a living, Eric, by taking gifts. He has more money than he can take anymore. So he now is in the gift acceptance business. He accepts automobiles, he accepts tractors, he accepts TV console units, and he gives them away because he can't keep them anymore. He's got all these cars, he's got all these tractors, he's got all this cattle. So he now uses the gifts that he gets illegally to expand his power by giving out these gifts to random people, secretaries, mayors, whatever in Washington. And he then becomes even more powerful. Now, everything is put in his wife's name, but that means nothing in the state of Texas because they're married. So she owns this TV station out of Austin, and the TV station is the only TV station in Austin. There's only one, and you got to buy ads. You got to pay LBJ's wife, and that means you got to pay LBJ. LBJ goes to, as a side note, LBJ goes to some news, NBC convention for NBC News. And he grabs one of these guys and he says, I want you to pay me the national rates for my ads that I air. And the guy says, I can't do that. You're a regional station. And he says, you could do whatever you want from what I understand. And you're going to want to give me those numbers. And he shook him down. And from that day on, he got national ad rates for a tiny regional TV station out of Austin, Texas. Okay. I mean, these are minor things, but it's fascinating because he is so similar to the Biden crime family. That's why, in other words, he takes tiny amounts of money projects to go under the radar. He takes TV sets. He takes all of these little things because the big things will be noticed. So he takes tons and tons of little things, which is what the Biden family's been doing for 35, 40 years. It's exactly the same story. And also, bragging about civil rights and I'm this and I'm that. They're both, absolute liars. I don't know about Biden's drinking anymore, but I understand that he went to rehab in Pennsylvania at one point for alcoholism. We've got LBJ, who's a total alcoholic. There's a lot of similarities between the two men. And anyway, we'll get to that in a couple of seconds.
Did LBJ did LBJ take all the little things too? Maybe because he grew up poor and that's kind of like horse trading. Like, he's not above it. It's like, I'll take a TV. I'll take this. I'll take that, whatever the hell it is due to a background.
But there was more to it than that. It was about going under the radar in terms of the size. And he was quite cognizant of being too greedy and taking stuff that was too big that would be noticed by his enemies. So he's particularly would take a car. He would take a tractor. He would take a horse. I mean, you talk about horse trading. He would literally take a horse. That's a little much. Or eventually he'll be vice president. But in the Senate, he will take all of these things. Now, he Bobby Baker is also a friend of Jack Kennedy's. He's also a friend of all these senators. He's also privy to all their secrets because what they're doing is they're all trading secrets. Like Jack Kennedy would say, what's Kerr up to with this? What's LBJ doing with that? And they would trade secrets. And this ends up not on purpose, but eventually with Bobby Baker being the man who kept the secrets in the Senate. And then he starts, in his defense, Bobby Baker says, I learned everything I know from these people I revered. And it turns out they weren't reverential in their operations. But he, in his explanation for why he went where he went, he says that I learned from these people. I don't know any other way of life since I was 15 years of age. And there is, he says he did things that he maybe shouldn't have done, which we'll get into. But he said, that's who I learned this stuff from. I learned from the masters. I learned from LBJ. I learned from all these guys who were corrupt. And he revered these people. He revered the Senate. I mean, nobody was more in terms of patriotic or in love with the Senate protocols and knew them all than Bobby Baker. And, in the cloakroom, that's where a lot of the activity went on in the Senate Democratic cloakroom, at least for the Democrats.
Sure.
Republicans and theirs. You would go into these cloakrooms and you would do things like, I'm getting a massage, Bobby. Can you delay the vote until I'm done with my massage? or whatever it was, or I'm hungover today, Bobby. Can you delay the vote on Senate Bill 182 because I just can't go out there? And he would do their bidding. Let's say a guy was out of town having surgery and was supposed to vote one way on a bill. They would get a parallel ghost from the Republican Party to go along and vote the same way as this guy to offset the guy and owe him a favor, if that makes any sense.
Sure.
And all of a sudden, some guy would just vote on the Democratic side, and this still goes on today, I presume. And it's because a guy was out of town, couldn't get there for the vote or having surgery or whatever. And they said, can you do me a favor and vote with the Democrats on this bill? I'll pay you back. And they did. And they did because they worked across the aisle.
Well, and a lot of the bills, not every bill is a war.
Right.
It's like the Supreme Court. I memean, what is it? I think 90 to like 95%, they pretty much just agree on and are almost unanimous. It's the little narrow ones. It's a really high. It's really high. Yeah.
Wow.
Shockingly high. But
well, he gets into some things here. I'll put it this way. In 1961, he decides to build a resort motel in Ocean View, Maryland. Is that a place? Ocean City. I take Ocean City, Maryland. There's nothing going on there yet because it's 1961. But he foresees that there'll be leisure time in America's future, and he wants to control the leisure time. And he figures that if he has this motel nightclub, it's 3 hours from D.C. There's a picture of the Carousel Motel. Okay, so he
built this. I did not know that.
Oh yeah. In fact, his partner commits suicide.
Partner self-deletes.
Oh Jesus! I'm sorry. I'm just an American. The partner self-deletes for reasons that nobody knows. The wife denied that he self-deleted, so there was a self-deletion debate. But nevertheless, he runs out of money. He's about to go bankrupt. Bob Kerr floats him about $300,000, which in 1961 times 8, do the math.
A lot of money.
Yeah. He floats him that no interest loan, or line of credit, whatever. And he finishes the motel nightclub. Now, you think, well, people can go there. I've seen Wally World. Maybe Chevy Chase goes there. This is filled with smoking hot chicks who may or may not be call girls, but they're called party girls back then. And these party girls are in different rooms, and people will book this through Bobby Baker, let's say on a Friday night and I'm driving down I'm going to go down to Ocean City, and he would hook them up with someone like maybe Ellen Romich, the East German sex pot. Ellen Romich was down there, and there's Ellen right there. She was from East Germany. She was married to a German sergeant, who guarded the embassy, not an American, a German, in Germany. But it was the German embassy in D.C., not to confuse anyone. So she was from East Germany, and there was rumors of her being with various people that were said by her. She was the one pushing these rumors. And in fact, they were not true. In fact, she was a honeypot and a spy working for the communists out of East Germany, and said that she had had affairs with the president, with Jack Kennedy and others. Mm-hmm. And this 2 weeks before she was deported, or a week before she was deported by Robert Kennedy, the Profumo affair happened, and Harold Macmillan, the prime minister of Great Britain, had to resign in the exact same scenario that Ellen Romich was propagating here in the States. John Profumo was the Secretary of Defense, or whatever they called it over there in England. He was with a prostitute at this level, a high-end call girl escort, very similar to Ellen Romich. And that's what they were trying to pull off with JFK. But the guy who had his back was the Attorney General of the United States, his brother, Robert Kennedy, who sniffed this out and got her out of the country. But while she was functioning, she was at the Quorum Club, which I'm going to get to in a second, and also this Carousel Motel owned by Bobby Baker. Now, Bobby Baker now has so much dirt on the Senate that he's kind of invincible, Eric.
Fun times. I vaguely remember you talking about the Carousel. I just didn't realize that he owned it and did it. It's like, wow.
Oh, yeah, he owned it, and he ran it. And he also opens up. Okay, this is in inside of a hotel, which is, I want to say it's called the Carroll Arms. It's about a stone's throw. It's like a boutique hotel, a stone's throw from Capitol Hill, like an inch away from Capitol Hill. On the second floor of the Carroll Arms.
That's the Quorum Club. I apologize.
This is the Quorum Club inside of the Carroll Arms Hotel.
Yep.
Now, this place was bulletproof and on the second floor of this place, and they would literally come from the Capitol and walk over to this place to drink and fraternize with women and have the protection of Bobby Baker through the Quorum Club. So again, he is open to all of these secrets of who's with who and who's with what. And they literally demand all these different girls from him, and he provides them. And he's not a pimp, but I mean, he's making a lot of money. Let's put it this way. LBJ came into government. The highest salary he ever made was $35,000 a year. And by 1963, he was worth multiple millions. Think about that. Think about Joe Biden. Think about the similarities. Never had a non-government job in his life, just like Brandon, and ended up a multi-millionaire multi-times over. When he left the White House, he literally took the silverware and the furniture and had it shipped out to Austin. You can't make this up. Every single
sounds like somebody else later, not Biden, but it sounds like somebody in the late 90s who did that one too.
Oh, okay. Well, anyway, he you know, when he wins the presidency, Jack Kennedy, and there's the debate out here in LA as to who's going to be the vice president, it's Bobby Baker who says to him, "You are one heartbeat away from the presidency, sir." It's Bobby Baker among the whole group that says, "Take the job, schmuck." He is the one guy, and that's the link between Baker and Jack Kennedy, and the FBI reports and the FBI showing Bobby Kennedy that Jack has been with a bunch of different women, some with Sam Giancana's girlfriend, some like Ellen Romich, who he really wasn't with, but he was with other women. I don't think he was with Romich, just my personal opinion. Anyway, so you had the British situation. These are both honey traps, totally professionally well played by the communists. The one in Britain took down the Prime Minister of England, Harold Macmillan, as our British friends of America's Untold Stories will remind us, hopefully afterwards. But I bring up the British part because it was a parallel operation operating here at the same exact time. So anyway, so Bobby Baker is making a ton of money from his thing. Now he comes in, the same thing. The highest salary he ever made was, as I think, $13,000. I think it was $13,000. But again, by 1963, he's worth $1.7 million. He buys a house across the street from Lyndon Johnson, who's across the street from J. Edgar Hoover. He goes from an apartment, Bobby Baker, a small, tiny house, to owning a mansion with a Chinese valet who opens the door for you, a Chinese guy. And then he names all his children after LBJ's children. So he acknowledges that he's Little Lyndon. He brags that he's Little Lyndon. LBJ calls him Little Lyndon. And not only that, he is referred to by everyone else in the Senate as Little Lyndon. So there's a lot of stuff going on. There's Little Lyndon. There's LBJ in the middle, obviously.
He looks like he adores him. I'm just saying. It's like
he said in his memoirs, he worshipped him. He did. I mean, he made no bones about it. This was a match made in heaven. And LBJ, was harsh to him like he was to anybody else. But he was his eyes and ears to go out and find, who was doing what the deals were. Now, one of the deals that happens is getting back to this little thing and getting back to November 22nd, 1963, which we're going to lead up to in a second. There's investigation. Remember when in one of our episodes with Eugene B. Dinkin, when LBJ flies to the Benelux countries to investigate and find Dinkin, who was AWOL, and going around to anyone who listened to him, that he stumbled onto the code of the assassination in
Luxembourg,
Dallas.
right? Luxembourg.
He goes to Luxembourg, but he's also supposed to go to Belgium. It's called the Benelux countries. There were other countries on that tour, and he never leaves his. LBJ gets there, and he never leaves his suite, and he can't, because he's on the phone dealing with this thing, and he cancels, and it's in the papers. Like the Danish press say this is the shortest tour any man's ever had of our country. He never comes out of the suite. He goes to the next country. And he can't get back fast enough, but he's trying to deal with the Dinkin thing. And he gets a call from Bobby Baker. Bobby Baker tells him that on the Metro section of the Washington Post that morning is a small article. And in that article, it says that Bobby Baker is being sued by a company that he screwed over when he created this ServU Corporation. A ServU is a bunch of vending machines that Bobby Baker got involved in to put into defense plants around the country. And when he did this chicanery, separate from LBJ, when he did this chicanery, he ousted the head of the company that he was screwing. And the ServU Corporation was, like I said, a bunch of machines. The guy who was ousted, suing Bobby Baker in civil court, makes it to like page B9 of the Washington Post. Bobby Baker sees it and calls up LBJ, who is in Luxembourg, like when we left in the other episode, Eric, to show some continuity. He now realizes that if the thread of this sweater, this LBJ, unravels, it's going to lead back to LBJ. If Bobby Baker goes down, LBJ goes down. And this is the beginning of the scandals surrounding Bobby Baker. And Bobby Baker now lawyers up, he panics. He's realizing that he's got so many different corrupt buckets of piss all around that, here's the cover of Life magazine the week before the assassination. Now, this is going on for weeks, the investigation into Bobby Baker. He gets called before the Senate Rules Committee, which is controlled by the Republicans, and he is now grilled about all these different things. And LBJ goes into a full-fledged panic, Eric. Full-fledged panic. And when he goes around for these different events, he looks like a man whose family was just killed by terrorists.
I believe it. That's him, I believe, in front of the Senate right here.
Yeah, that's the Senate testimony by Baker. Everybody said they didn't know him. Everybody said they've never met him.
Who?
The equivalent of that. Lobbyists showed up who said they didn't know him. LBJ, everybody, planned to throw him under the bus because he was radioactive. And, an event happens the day before, the day of the assassination, which we detailed in some of the previous episodes, where a cat named Don Reynolds shows up. And Don Reynolds is an insurance salesman out of South Carolina. You say, who is Don Reynolds? I don't know if you have a picture of Don Reynolds.
Don Reynolds calling.
In 1950, Don Reynolds on the phone. In 1957, Don Reynolds sold a $100,000 insurance policy to LBJ. And you say, wow, what's a big deal? Baker brokered that deal. And the reason it's a big deal is because he couldn't get insured, LBJ, because of his heart attack. No insurance company in the state of Texas would insure LBJ because he had had 2 heart attacks. And Baker says, I can fix this. And he brings in this guy, Don Reynolds, who sells him these 2 life insurance policies. And from that, he gets a commission of $2,500. So you multiply $2,500 times 8 or 9, you'll get the current amount of money just from his commission, right? So he gets a call one day from the closeted gay Walter Jenkins and says, LBJ would like you to buy advertising on his wife's television station in Austin, Texas. And the guy says, look, I'm operating out of South Carolina. I don't know why I need ads in Austin, Texas. So they said, look, we don't care what you think you need. That's the system. So it's a system of kickbacks, organized kickbacks, where LBJ would get people to buy these ads, the advertising dollars. It was a money laundering kickback scheme. And it was a gift, you know. Later on, he buys the ads, but that's not enough. They want him to also buy. I can't make this up. They want him to buy a giant stereo TV console for Lady Bird Johnson, and it's like they send Lady Bird the catalog. She picks out. I swear to God. She picks out a $900 unit. If you multiply times 8, you understand the cost of this particular color, this TV, and it was called the Magnavox S44. If anybody wants to look it up, cherry wood giant unit. You know, with cherry wood, Eric. You know, it's like a huge piece of furniture.
Yeah,
right?
those television consoles were very fancy. I mean, back in the day.
Right. Okay. So not only does he have to buy this guy Reynolds, who knows nothing, he's just an insurance guy, right? So now, not only did he have to buy airtime on this cockamamie channel in Austin, Texas, which is KTBC TV out of Austin, by the way, for people at home, the TV, she wants it delivered because she's having a party this weekend. So he's got to airlift this TV to Austin, Texas from South Carolina, where he's bought it or wherever the hell he bought it from. And this system that he brings to her, she picks it out herself, Lady Bird. So it's one that she wants. Anyway, so this goes on multiple times. Now, the point of the matter is, not just with, goes on once with him, but this goes on multiple times with various vendors. All of the vendors that are his ranch, his homes in D.C., whatever, these are some of the things that LBJ extracts from people. And he doesn't physically do the extraction, but he monitors the whole thing. He has Walter Jenkins do it. So this guy, this is the day of the assassination. I can't stress this enough. In the old Senate office building, this guy, Don Reynolds, is testifying about this incident before these two. One is an investigator for the Republicans. The other is an accountant for the General Accounting Office. So he's like not a political guy, but he is an accountant, right? So he sells him this thing, and he now has receipts because they say to him while he is that's Burkett Van Kirk. The guy standing up, I think, is Burkett Van Kirk. No, I take that back. It's not Burkett Van Kirk. That's a senator. Burkett Van Kirk is in room 312 of the old Senate office building, and he's in there with his accountant named Lauren Drennan. And the reason this is important because they are 1 hour behind Dallas in actual time. The events in Dallas are unfolding 60 minutes ahead of this investigation. So when Kennedy is killed at 12:30 Dallas time, I think it's 1:30 Washington time, if I'm correct, right?
Yeah, Central to Eastern, yeah.
Central to Eastern, okay. He's testifying for hours and hours. And not only is he testifying a long time, that Life magazine cover that you showed has a new one. That's the week before the assassination. They have a new Life magazine edition coming out the next day, which is 9 Life magazine reporters have been working on this thing for months. And it's a huge expose about LBJ's involvement with Bobby Baker on all of these corrupt scandals. There's a great photo of the two of them. That issue is about to hit the newsstands that Friday in I guess in D.C. and New York, wherever Life magazine released the first versions of it. But in this Senate office building, room 302 in the old Senate office building, this guy is testifying, and they're saying why they're playing devil's advocate, but they're saying, you know, let me ask something, Mr. Reynolds, why should we believe you? And he takes out all the receipts, the canceled checks, the stamp of LBJ Corporation on the back, the checks made out. I mean, the receipts, delivery. Dude, it was insane what he brought out of his valise with his lawyer. He's there with his lawyer, and he's, I guess, in a way, a whistleblower. I don't know if they had whistleblower status back then as a law, but this is, in essence, a whistleblower is what's going on. So he now lays out the entire plot of how he was shaken down, how he was railroaded by LBJ. And these guys kind of knew this because there's a guy feeding Life magazine this information for months. There's a guy in the government who is feeding the information to them and also to these Republican senators, and that is the Attorney General of the United States, Bobby Kennedy, the arch nemesis of LBJ. So Bobby Baker, this is a couple of years before, this is during the campaign, he says to Bobby Kennedy, let's have breakfast together. The two wives, he sits down with Bobby Kennedy, they have breakfast. And as he's eating breakfast, Bobby Baker says to RFK Sr., you know, I think your brother Teddy was a little harsh on LBJ when he was campaigning in Texas last month. And he refers to Teddy Kennedy talking about LBJ's bad heart because LBJ is running for president against Jack Kennedy. And Baker says, that is foul play, my friend. He said very nicely, he says, that's going too far. This is what he says. Bobby Kennedy snaps, his face goes beet red, and he refers again to LBJ calling his father a Nazi. And, you know, LBJ having said that Joseph Kennedy was a fan of the Fuhrer. Now, he loses his shit, Bobby Kennedy, completely snaps and storms away from the breakfast. Now, here's a weird little twist. Der Fuhrer means the leader. LBJ insisted that every single person in government call him the leader. Really? That's what he was called, either Führer or Der Führer, and in English, leader or the leader. Everyone who came up to him either called him leader or, in reference to him, the leader. He wasn't a Senate Majority Leader. He was leader of the he was the Democratic leader. He changed the name when he became Senate Majority Leader. He changed it to the Democratic leader. If you follow the difference, there's a slight difference. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so this guy's getting grilled in this office building, and in this office, and he has all these documents out. And a secretary comes in the middle of this, and it's 12:41 in Dallas, Texas. So it makes it like 1:41, right? They skipped lunch. They didn't even go to lunch. It's I've read the congressional record on this. They didn't even go to lunch. That's how indictable this material was. And the secretary comes in crying and hysterical, saying the president's been killed. The president's been killed. And it dawns on Don Reynolds in a millisecond, and he starts gathering in the paperwork on his desk. And they go, "What are you doing, Mr. Reynolds?" And he said, "It's one thing," this famous quote, "it's one thing to testify against the vice president, but it's insane to testify against the president." And they're going, "Oh, come on now. Come on, let's just keep going." He goes, "Oh, no." He takes all his documents and he's shoving them into his briefcase to get out of there, realizing that LBJ, the guy that he is indicting, is now the president of the United States of America.
I hope did Don Reynolds come out okay in the years down the road, because not every associate necessarily did.
Well, he was pretty far away out of the tentacles of power. I mean, he lived in South Carolina. He wasn't in D.C. He was an insurance salesman. I mean, I never heard any foul play coming to him. But what does happen is that Bobby Baker is given a lawyer named Abe Fortas, who is the personal lawyer for LBJ, to try to get him out of this mess. He'll later get Edward Bennett Williams. I don't know if maybe a photo of the two of them.
I have Edward, but not Abe.
That's Williams on the left, Edward Bennett Williams, the famous D.C. Mouthpiece. He tries to quit the job. I mean, he resigns. He does resign. You know, he does immediately resign when he's caught. But LBJ immediately says he holds a press conference when he gets back, and he has one of his press secretaries. He says George Reedy, who he hated the most. George Reedy was an intellectual. He was the only East Coast intellectual press secretary he ever had. Bill Moyers was from Texas. He was an untouchable. The two untouchables the only two guys who could talk back to LBJ were John Connolly and, oddly enough, Bill Moyers. George Reedy was the butt of his complete destruction when he briefly press secretary. He had a bunch of different press secretaries. Anyway, so Reedy is there while this is happening. That was his watch. And he says that you're just going to have to come clean, Mr. President, you know, and say you knew the guy. I mean, you had friends and everything. Everybody knew. It would be like Biden saying he didn't know Obama. You know what I mean? And there's all this press conferences, footage, the two of them together. Every reporter he's lying to in person, face to face in the press conference is looking at him like going, you've got to be shitting me. I mean, we're the same guys he's been speaking to for 4 years. You know, this is impossible. We know you and Bobby Baker are together. Doesn't care. Just continues to beat the bushes that he's never met him in his life. And it's like there's press conferences with him. He's drinking with him. He's partying with him. He's got the kids named after him. But LBJ decides to just gaslight the entire country, gaslight the Washington press corps for that matter.
Wow.
I mean, Bobby Baker meets a secretary in the Senate, marries her in the ceremonies in the Senate. He said, I was a child of the Senate. That's how up the Senate's world he is. Now, there's a girl named Carol Tyler. Now, Carol Tyler, I think she was, there's Carol Tyler. This is a mistress of Bobby Baker. Bobby Baker buys a townhouse in D.C., and he puts her in there. Carol Tyler, she was Miss Loudoun County. She was, I think, she was from Tennessee. So when I think they're saying Miss Loudoun County, I think they're talking about some Loudoun County in Tennessee, Eric. I don't know if they're.
No, I'm glad you clarified because there's one near DC. So, yeah.
I know, that's what I'm saying. But it could have been that one. I'm not sure. I think there's one in Tennessee. Somebody from Tennessee may help us out here. If you can get your house in order there down in Tennessee. I don't know what's going on. But she's 24 years old. She is now put into a townhouse with a bunch of other girls like her. And this becomes yet a third upscale bordello being run by Bobby Baker. This is another one. There's a photo of a blonde actress. I think maybe you've got some other shots of another one of these women. There's so much activity going on here.
Dorothy?
Oh, Dorothy Malone. Yeah, she was an actual actress. But she's also linked to this mess. So anyway, the whole group is now in trouble because Baker is linked to LBJ. But now
there's a Loudoun,
Tennessee. Oh, thank you. Okay, great. I thought so. I was confused because she was only 24 and she was Miss Loudoun County. So
Loudoun and Virginia Sheriff State line.
Right. No wonder. Okay. Thank you. So anyway, the Quorum Club, all of this stuff begins to collapse inward. The press has a field day with the sexual stuff. They go absolutely batshit crazy over this stuff. And everybody is scampering to hide and saying they don't know him. Everybody's trying to save their hides. The Carousel Club will eventually go out of business. You know, in 1954, Baker is worth $11,000. In 1963, he's worth $1.8 million as a net worth. So this is not LBJ level money, but keep in mind, You know, 1.8.
Good money.
Yeah. But yeah, so you've got the 101st senator. You got, you know, the investigation going on. LBJ becomes the president. He now has to get rid of, indirectly, he has to get rid of the attorney general of the United States, who's in mourning anyway. He pulls it off. You know, whatever you want to say about Bobby Baker's involvement in it, Bobby Baker is the one that convinces him to take the vice presidential slot. He does not want to do that. And in fact, he, you know, when he hears the scuttlebutt about being kicked off the ticket in 1964, he thinks, all right, I'm done. I don't think I could do 4 more years on this vice presidential nothingness. You know what I mean? It's like Jack Kennedy says to him, look, I really appreciate what you're doing. I know it sucks. This job blows. And meanwhile, he's Uncle Cornpone behind the scenes being ridiculed by all of the Kennedy aides. You know what I mean? And that is payback for LBJ calling Joseph Kennedy a Nazi. That is from Robert Kennedy. And that's why he says repeatedly, I will cut his throat from ear to ear if it's the last thing I do. He says this to numerous people on numerous occasions. And in 1968, RFK will meet his fate after this man bails out of running for re-election on March 31st, 1968. And we have a similar situation today with RFK Jr. running and the possible bailing out by Brandon. If Brandon, as I said last week on the show, if Brandon bails, it's wide open, brother. If Brandon doesn't bail, it's LBJ running for a second
By
term.
the way, Brandon did say, I'm not prepared to announce my run yet.
I know, but
literally
that could go either way. They may be doing a big South Carolina announcement, you know, as a historic blah, 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 phony bullshit thing down there. So that really doesn't scare me.
Sure. Crazy timing, though, just to.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you really don't want to announce with Al Roca doing the weather. You know what I mean? I mean, that's not really a historic place. It's really not the historically best spot to announce. You know what I mean? But anyway, so Little Lyndon gets sentenced to 3 years in federal prison, and he is sent to a place where don't show who his cellmate is, because that's going to come up in a second. He gets sent to Lewisburg Federal Penitentiary in Lewisburg, Kentucky. That's his wife coming out of the courtroom with him. And he goes to do his time. I don't know. Yeah, this is him in handcuffs. He's absolutely shit-faced. He drank all night. He was an alcoholic, like LBJ. He drank all night scotch and soda, just like LBJ did. He was in a blackout here. He doesn't remember this, with the handcuffs being brought into Lewisburg. And when he goes into Lewisburg, there's a shot from behind through the bars by a reporter. I mean, this guy's going to do some real time here, Eric. I think he did 16 months, by the way. So when he goes in there, he's kind of just drunk off his ass, you know, but a guy comes up to him and says, they're going to kill you here as soon as they realize who you are. You're a dead man. And he goes, what? He goes, yeah, you represent the government. You represent everything they hate. You represent the forces that put them here. And he doesn't even realize this, Bobby Baker, because he's never been arrested in his life, never been in jail. He doesn't know what to do. And this guy says, you're a dead man. You're a dead man. And he says, what if I get transferred to another prison? Because it's not going to matter. He says, somebody's going to want to make their bones, you know, by you know, you being shanked by them. And the guy says, look, I can take care of you if you just do what I say, but you got to do what I say. And he parades the guy around the prison. This was the first day he's in Lexington. And Lexington will later have guys like Whitey Bulger and an MK Ultra LSD program. I don't know what's going on in this particular year, but what was that?
I have my own traffic. They're not only coming for you. It's like
no, I was thinking, they're coming for Eric now. Okay,
I think so.
So the guy parades him around the yard puts his arm around him, is another little guy just like Baker. And the guy's name is Jimmy Hoffa. And Jimmy Hoffa and Bobby Baker have one thing in common: incredible hatred for Bobby Kennedy. And Hoffa protects, for 16 months, Hoffa protects the life of Bobby Baker and saves his life. And Bobby Baker is no fan of Jimmy Hoffa's, but he respects Jimmy Hoffa for doing that. And Jimmy Hoffa is doing this on his own. There's really no upside for Jimmy Hoffa to do this. I guess maybe he's hoping, like he always is, for a pardon, but this is the wrong party to be pardoning him, if I may say.
Yeah, it's a helpful investment for later favors.
Yeah, but he knew that Baker was a dead man walking. He really was. The one word that LBJ hated about Baker from the press, just drove him insane, drove him crazy, was protege.
Oh.
When he heard protege, he goes, "Dag nabbit, Bobby, you got it." And he would just be apoplectic about, "I don't even know what protege means. God nabbit, boy." And he would just go crazy about the press and just rip up the papers and start throwing them around the White House, But I mean, what LBJ did, and Bobby Baker will eventually get out in 16 months and then try to rehabilitate himself, which he never does. But the fact he writes the memoir, and it's really interesting. 1967, he never spoke to him again. Never spoke to him again, LBJ. He never, and this really hurt Bobby Baker's feelings because he was like a father figure to him. Never spoke to him again. Gets a call from Walter Jenkins, 1967, from the ranch, and says, "LBJ would like to talk to you. Come out here to the ranch." Goes out to the ranch, flies out, goes to Austin, goes to the ranch, and LBJ wants to know one thing: is that book going to be a kiss and tell book, your memoir, or not? He wants to know in the memoir, which pays all his legal debts for Bobby Baker, writes a memoir, Wheeling and Dealing, great book, by the way. If you want to learn how the sausage is made, read Wheeling and Dealing by Bobby Baker, fantastic book. He wants to know if that is going to be a kiss and tell all book involving him. And he breaks his silence with Bobby Baker to simply get him out there. And Bobby Baker turns the tables on him and says, "Maybe you can help me out with the Justice Department." It's on probation, shit like that. You know what I mean? He says, "Maybe you could help me out a little bit." And the Justice Department. And LBJ just turns around and walks away. Never said another word. Didn't answer the question. Never said another word to him. And in fact, it is a kiss and tell memoir because, a lot of the stuff that I've learned about LBJ and the making of how the Senate works, never mind just LBJ, because he's there before LBJ's in the Senate. And there's just a ton of information in that book. There's another one called All the Way with LBJ, which is about the campaign. And then there's the Caro books, of course, that are just laden with Bobby Baker stuff. Master of the Senate, Passage of Power, the two that come to mind. Dozens and dozens and dozens of tidbits in those two books that, if you're a Johnson aficionado like I am, are the Bibles of Johnson. But yeah, I mean, the Bobby Baker stuff it just opens the window into how the system ran back then. And I don't know if it's running the same way now. I don't know how it's run now, but Baker says it was wide open back then. He personally was a bag man for LBJ. He would deliver tens of thousands of dollars physically in cash. Different guys the physics of delivering money was like an intricate nonstop web of money for all different things, just nonstop being delivered to different people, different times, different senators. Bobby Baker would buy up your campaign debt of the new guy that came in, not personally with his money. He would use someone else's money who would buy up your campaign debt and then own you.
Jesus.
Then, yeah. Dude, it's so dark. It's so dark how this worked back in the day. And, I don't know if it's the same now. They have some, campaign finance laws and things of that nature. But nevertheless, it is a fascinating window into American politics. Now, there were guys who were not corrupt, like this Bob Kerr and Mike Mansfield, the senator from Montana, who replaces LBJ as Senate Majority Leader. Now, Mike Mansfield signs off with LBJ that they will share power when he's vice president. And this scheme is what he tells Bobby Baker to shop around the Senate to see if they'll accept him, LBJ, as vice president. This is the scheme that he comes up with, and would share power with a timid meditation freak named Mike Mansfield, who was a nice guy, but the anti-LBJ once again. And Mansfield agrees to it. Mansfield, for some reason, agrees to this. And everyone in the Senate goes berserk, especially on the liberal side. The Yarboroughs and the Albert Gores out of Tennessee, to give another plug towards Tennessee today. A big Tennessee day today. Albert Gore, who Baker said was another dick, another one of these prima donnas. He names names in the book. He names who's a dick, who's a prima donna, who is a weasel, who is a criminal, and who you can trust and who you can't trust. And a lot of times they don't want to trust these ideologues. The worst thing that they have to deal with is some maniac ideologue in the Democratic Party who they can't do business with.
Oh.
But anyway, so the plan is shopped around by Bobby Baker privately on the floor of the Senate cloakroom and whispering about LBJ has this deal, and they flip out. And in fact, at one point, I think it's either Albert Gore or Ralph Yarborough out of Texas says, next thing you know, we'll be having Jack Kennedy himself coming down here and passing legislation. I mean, he really misjudged this attempt to retain power as master of the Senate. Now, it's not that crazy of an idea if we look towards a vice president a number of years later under George Bush Jr., Dr.
Cheney.
Evil.
Yeah,
like Dr. Evil came up with a plan. And who would have thought that was the plan? The plan that Cheney came up with was what LBJ wanted to do and professed to the Kennedys, this is what I can do. And he was the original Dr. Evil, Dick Cheney type. The Kennedys, through Bobby, put the kibosh on it and just sent him around the world to visit India and camels and all this other crap, because that was the payback. That was the payback for calling Joseph Kennedy a Nazi lover. And Kennedys never forget. They never forget. And look, I mean, as I said earlier on, there's numerous sightings of the quote, I will cut his throat if it's from ear to ear if it's the last thing I do, about RFK. Now, he had, for the convention in 64, he had 30 FBI agents assigned to Bobby Kennedy Sr. by J. Edgar Hoover, his neighbor across the street. He had FBI surveilling Bobby Kennedy day in and day out on shifts all the way through to the night of his death, Eric.
Wow.
That's right. An entire team of FBI agents were here in LA, and a couple of them we mentioned in the RFK story. You may want to take a look at a guy who claimed to have found one of the bullet holes in the Ambassador Hotel pantry door. That was an FBI agent. And that's in the RFK episode, or the Sirhan episode. I don't know what we're calling it.
We had like an overlap, Sirhan and RFK, because it's just tied to the assassination.
Right. Okay.
Maybe more.
But anyway, the point of the matter is, when he said here at San Fernando Valley State College, which is now Cal State Northridge, when he gave that speech here, that he was going to reopen the Warren Commission and the death of his brother, that a lot of people believe was his death certificate. When Bobby Kennedy in May of that year said that he was going to reopen the investigation, and he said to the effect also that only the power of the presidency can unravel the assassination of my brother. And the FBI went right back to Hoover, who went right to LBJ, his neighbor, and reported exactly the words. And within 30 days, RFK was dead. Yeah. Now you could say it's a coincidence. I mean, obviously, things happen, shit happens, but
yeah, especially if your name's Kennedy. I mean, what are the odds? Which political family in America has two brothers both getting killed in a similar manner?
Well, if they didn't get the message, then we're gonna start this up again. Because RFK Jr. is going to announce in Boston, Massachusetts. I think Barnes was talking about it this week on the show that he's going to announce in Boston next week, I think. And then he's got Secret Service. It's a full-fledged campaign. What he does with it, we'll yet to see. But I mean, we now have a Kennedy running for president. I mean, that's got to interest the media. What they do with that, whether they completely smear him or completely shut the door on him, I don't know which way they're going to go as of yet. They may just ignore it, or they may just do an early smear and try to knock him out with a knockout punch straight up, but they're going to have to respond to a Kennedy running for president.
Well, we did talk about it last week on Freeform Friday, and the subject may come up again this week on Freeform Friday. Who knows?
Yeah.
Because it is definitely in the wind right now.
It's definitely in the wind. And look, he's a great guy. He's a smart guy. He's a lawyer. I mean, he's a guy who's righteous. We need something. Something's got to give here. I mean, if that's what it takes, that's what it takes. I don't know. Short of Biden bailing out and having a wide open nomination fight, like I said last week, I don't see a road to the Democratic nomination. If Bernie Sanders couldn't find the pathway, I highly doubt that this anti-injection guy will find a pathway. However, if Brandon doesn't run, it's like I said last week, it's every man for himself. Anything goes, which is what happened in 68. That's what happened in 68. Once LBJ bailed out, it was wide open. It was wide open. And, then when his father was killed, LBJ threw his weight and his marionette sticks behind a senator from Minnesota named Hewitt H. Humphrey. And he controlled every single aspect of Humphrey's campaign. Every single aspect. And you know what? It almost worked. Because the last couple of days of the campaign, he almost pulled it off with Humphrey. He almost pulled it off. It came very, very close. The lead was enormous. And I'll tell you something else. Guess where they're holding the National Democratic Convention for this 2024? Won't you please come to Chicago? the streets of Chicago.
Wow. It's an echo. Chicago. Everything's echoing like crazy.
The echoes are insane. My head's reverberating. You're going to have this new crazy mayor there in Chicago. You've got street violence. You've got the convention coming there. You've got Marxists coming out of the woodwork. Wow. It's going to be nuts. 2024. I don't know where the Republican one is. I don't think they've announced yet. But, I would put it in South Carolina if I was them because, you need some allies around you for this thing. But that being said, we're going to see what Bobby Kennedy Jr. brings to the parade. Bobby Kennedy Sr. Was the arch nemesis of LBJ. And I not that I know about what blood these two people have between each other, but I would suggest to you that this angry old ice cream eating man might not be a fan of Bobby Kennedy Jr. based on what he has said about him and his programs. So let me just put it that way. So if they can not put a muzzle on this Gomper, we might have some very fascinating statements coming out of Gomperville.
All right. Well, we've got some support coming here on YouTube. Larry Gresham is a new member.
Gresham.
Pamela Clifton's video and music, $5 super chat. Thank
She
you
makes
very much.
videos and music.
I know. Sam Jones with 499 pounds. Awesome podcast, guys.
Sam Jones used to be a backcourt guard with Casey Jones for the Boston Celtics, if I'm not mistaken. But that's another story.
Could be. Super sticker from Scott Bimbo. Thank you very much.
Scott Bimbo?
Scott Bimbo. Yeah, I don't want to say it too many times too quickly because it might come out wrong.
Yeah.
Carl Burkhalter is a new member. And
Burkhalter.
Yeah, but he also gave us a $5 super chat. My parents worked at Parkland, frequented Carousel, knew Candy. Dad was a naval officer, petroleum engineer before becoming an MD. Ruby was bagman.
Right.
Wow.
Well, he's got that right. He's got that right.
Definitely tied in there.
Well, he was a bagman out of Chicago, and he was a bagman in this particular case. But I haven't seen the interview with Barnes and Roger Stone, but it was Roger Stone who famously said Nixon told him when he saw Ruby shoot Oswald that guy used to work for me and was one of LBJ's boys.
Yeah, I think you said it with in the Viva Fry interview too.
Okay. Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah, and you said it in his book for sure. I remember that.
Yeah, it's in the book. Yeah.
Peter Crocito with a $49.99 super sticker, and Peter is on Locals and was talking to me on a grill stream. So he does talk.
Oh, he does.
But he just doesn't ask questions here. But we definitely deeply appreciate the support.
In these turbulent times.
Oh yeah. Especially when people are saying things instead of self-deletion, because we already have a flag from last week. It's like, no, not that word. Not that word.
Boy, they are obsessed with this one word.
Ban hammer. Darren Conrad, another great episode. It was so great to have truth seekers in the world today. It's time for the public to know the facts of so many horrific events in our history. Thank you. And Darren is actually a powerlifting cop out of North Carolina, I believe.
Bravo.
Sparty Matt, $2. RFK gives me hopes, but how good is his security?
I assume he's going to have private security on top. And now keep in mind, his father tried to get, this is a little bonus baby info. His father tried to get rid of the Secret Service guarding his brother, proposed legislation in January of 1963 in the House. I forget the House bill number, to replace the Secret Service with U.S. Marshals, and that he could control as Attorney General the U.S. Marshals and FBI agents. So he didn't trust the Secret Service. When LBJ took power in November, one of the first things he did was have that bill squashed.
Well, which is sad. We got a tip on Locals from Gary W. A $10 tip. My Eric Cartman impersonation. I love you guys. I can't do Eric Cartman. So
let me tell you something. There's an episode of South Park this week that people might want to take a look at. I'm not going to give it away, but newsreel footage for a brief second of January 6th appears in the middle of the episode. And it's jarring. I've never seen that on South Park. Little tip of the hat. You might want to take a look at it, Jason, of South Park.
All right, Pasha Moyer. I'm on the This, and my phone battery is dying, so I'll ask now. Yiddish word of the day. Maybe I'll still be here when you read this. Maybe not.
No, we're switching over, like I said last week, to Heroes of the Blues of the day. And today's hero of the blues is Blind Blake. Blind Blake is today's Heroes of the Blues. Jacksonville's Arthur Blake ranks among the most accomplished rag and blues guitarists of all time. In the 1920s, he based his career in Chicago. Between 1926 and 32, recorded nearly 80 records for Paramount, afterwards to fade into obscurity. Unlike most blind performers, he played dance-oriented music. His polished technique and effortless sounding improvisations attracted many imitators, but admitted no equals. Today's blues hero of the day, Blind Blake.
All right. Sean Luby, thank you both for all the great work. Thank you, Sean. And then Pasha wants to straighten it out. By the way, not bis, but bus. So Pasha is not on the bis, he's on the bus.
Okay.
I wanted to clarify
Stay
that.
on the bus. Let me tell you something. I was watching the Sunday night show with Barnes and Viva, and he was the first guy to comment on the show. He was the first super chat.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And look, we have Sparty Matt again. I always thought LBJ killed RFK out of pettiness, which I didn't make sense if he could have just been president again. But you said he only announced after LBJ didn't run. Can't believe I didn't connect those dots before.
Okay, that's right. Yeah, I again, the McCarthy people were very unhappy because he was the peace candidate, and McCarthy came within a couple of percentage points in the New Hampshire primary, the first in the nation, or I think it was first back then, and it was replaced by Iowa. Now we got a battle with South Carolina. But that was so humiliating to LBJ that McCarthy came within shouting distance of the sitting president, that many people believe, and LBJ acknowledged, that was one of the major factors for him not running.
Well, I mean, if the momentum was that way, he very well could have overtook him in a later primary.
Right, but he could have bulldogged his way through, you know what I mean? And with money that he had, I think he was done mentally, spiritually, and alcoholically. I think there was more to it than just pragmatic politics at that point.
Could be. Bob Ruhlman, great show as always. Any chance you might have an Ask Mark Anything episode about the JFK assassination soon? I rewatched the ones from last year.
Probably, yeah. If we run out of material or we're in between. Sometimes when I have to read a lot, it takes a couple of weeks. That we'll put that in there in between as a bridge.
Yeah, I think that'll work, definitely. Because we're putting a lot through. Now you said Billy Sol Estes is next.
So. Yeah, Billy Sol Estes and also John Connolly are going to, and then Curtis LeMay. So they're going to be very, very big projects for me. And then I've got some other things I'm doing with Oswald on my own. So I got a full plate. All
right. Handles us with 420. Thank you very much. Very interesting number there. Jen, with $20, if RFK Jr. wins in 2024, do you believe that one of the first things he does is pardon Sirhan? I don't think he can. Or can he? It's a state thing.
It's a state problem. It's not a federal problem.
Let's see. Mark's short video about the CCP's version of CIA blew my mind. So what's their name? Thanks, guys. That was one of the shorts I released. I'm doing the CIA stuff. But
it's talking about the CIA of China?
Right, because that's one of the questions you've asked multiple times. You're like, so who are they?
I've been saying this for 10 years. Why do we hear about MI6, the CIA, and the Mossad, but we hear about the KGB? Why do we never hear a peep about the CIA of China?
We don't.
That's right, we don't, because they're the ones doing nefarious things.
Which, by the way, tells you that they're probably the best spy agency in the world, or one of them. The best spy agency you don't know about. And thank you, Humboldt Script.
Right. I mean, it started with MSG and then later COVID. In my new memoir, From MSG to COVID, you'll get the whole historical analysis.
All right. Oh, some more tips came in on locals. Which, by the way, this is streaming live on Locals with a private chat for anybody who wants to be there and away from the great unwashed masses.
Listen, I'm sorry about the sound. Like, there's some problem with Chrome and StreamYard and Mac. I'm not sure. Like, you can't even download Chrome any longer on the App Store. So I think Apple is distancing themselves from Chrome, Eric. Besides. There's some distancing going on here, because I did download a brand new Chrome this week, and the only thing that crashes is StreamYard. So we're gonna have to figure something out.
Yeah, so, we're gonna be working on this before the next show.
We'll work on it. I just want to apologize if there's any sound problems. We have an older audience, and I get the image of the guy sitting there with the cone sticking out of his ear. Like
what? Did you hear that?
On his porch. He's like, what?
Yeah. Let me see. Gary W. sent a $15 tip. Love the blues harp, Mark.
Oh, me too.
And also sent another $10 tip. Sirhan per plus Hinkley, Sir Hink. Okay, a new portmanteau for
Boy, Hinckley's really
potential.
cranking out the art this past month, hasn't he, Eric?
I haven't really followed on it, but
he's got cat paintings coming out of every orifice.
Oh, great.
Yeah, Hinckley's working overtime.
Okay, well, we've been discussing this for a while. Liberty for us all. Who shot Connolly? That's
an interesting question. It's a question that we will discuss in the Connolly episode. It may not be who shot him, but where was he shot from?
Right.
That's something I think I figured out a number of years ago. I don't know physically who did that shooting. I don't think I'm going to answer that in the episode, but I will answer from whence he was shot, just simply because I've talked to some snipers and the angles of Connolly's wounds. I mean, it's pretty obvious that he was shot from above, possibly on the rooftop of the Dallas Texas School Book Depository building, in my humble opinion. It's just a very, very steep downward angle from his back through the lower portion of the front into his thigh. It's just like, whoop, straight down. And it can't be like this. It's got to be like that. And that is a steep angle that could be the roof of the criminal courts building where Weatherford was, or on top of the Texas School Book Depository building, which is what I think.
All right, this is my challenge of the day here. I don't know if I can even do it. It's Chris Digion Goros. I don't know if I did it right. Greetings from Cyprus. And Mark, we love dogs. But do you love Oswald?
Greece that hates dogs, not Cyprus.
But you got to love Oswald. Oswald is, of course, the best dog and much better than that pedestrian Grobert.
When I was 10 years old, I was a background. Oh, interesting. Very interesting.
Very cool.
I'm sure you found him to be charming, like I did, and everybody did. So it's not just me, but
yeah, I haven't seen any negative about him.
No,
unless you're a tobacco manufacturer, then he was pretty up on that. But other than that, he was well loved. I mean, he had cast members at his deathbed. That's a weird one. It's like, how many people are so adored, even that their castmates are, still hanging around?
Well, maybe the Three Stooges.
Oh, okay. So 70 years later, whatever it is. But all right. So Friday, hope to see everybody back. It's going to be Freeform Friday. I have no idea if it's going to be us alone or not, but we'll be there. And we don't know. The pen will be there. Mark's taking notes and clicking away. So hope to see everybody then.
Mm-hmm.
In the meantime, if you want to donate to the book fund, that's of course
there's a book fund.
Well, there's a PayPal for Mark, and he claims that he buys books there. So you can help him.
I have to get another place to keep these books because it's getting crazy here. I don't know what I'm going to do. I have to move some to the garage. Something's got to go.
All right. And everybody consider following us on locals, on structured.locals.com. We're always putting up a little bit more content there. Mark is posting there. It's starting to get pretty busy. I mean,
really?
A lot of people
I've been putting a lot of stuff up. Fuck Twitter. I'm just going to put it up on locals. You know what I mean? Like, Twitter doesn't really do it for me. I think the locals community is much more engaging.
Oh, for sure. And
I'm tired of blocking people also. So
and I'm tired of it. Yes. Good. Just stop blocking. Just hang out on locals. No blocking needed.
On locals because I can't block these douches anymore. It's just like a douche fest over there. I just got to. I'm just one man. Why they need me to unblock them why they even need to follow me is, beyond me. But
just hang out at locals. You don't have to block anyone on Twitter, and I don't have to hear about it. It's just a total win all around.
Win-win.
Win. And on that note, we will see everybody Friday, and we will win together.
Okay. Thanks for winning.